It should not come as a surprise to say that Fixa Natura has been the laughingstock of NGS when it comes to Fixas. This is because no class except Force has enough natural PP recovery to see a real difference take place from those Fixa Natura units. But that may all be coming to an end. In the latest update note posted, we were shown all of the new class skills that we will be receiving upon the Kvaris region release. I highly recommend checking out all of the new skills, but I want to focus exclusively on the Force skill Rod Technique PP Well Up. This skill says, you recover PP naturally while activating techniques. However, your natural PP recovery speed is reduced. We have a similar skill already in the Force skill tree called Technique Charge PP Well Up, which allows you to naturally recover PP while charging techniques. The problem was you infrequently casted charge techniques, which in turn lessened that amount of time you were spending naturally recharging PP. And this is where Fixa Natura became a joke. There were so many restrictions to when and where you could benefit that it made more sense going for Fixa Performa or Fixa Enthusia on your units. But that all changes with this new skill. You can now have 100% natural PP recovery uptime. So let's revisit Fixa Natura today and see if it can make an impact in the upcoming Kvaris region. Really quick side note, guys, please subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the content that I do provide. Like the video if you do enjoy it. And I just want to say thank you so much to Cakewalk. You are a saint for giving me such a wonderful idea to work on while I am recovering from being sick. And one more thing, guys, everything that we discussed today is purely hypothetical. There is no actual concrete evidence on exactly how this skill operates. So we are using our best intuition for how that skill should work, but we have no proof. So hopefully what we discussed today in the video is going to be how that skill works, but just in case it isn't, quick disclaimer, nothing here is set in stone. All right, let's get to the video. How PP accumulation occurs. You have two different distinct paths. You have offensive PP recovery means. This would be things like normal attacks, sidestep counters, weapon actions, and some class skills can give you offensive PP recovery. And then you have natural PP recovery, which is regeneration during normal attacks or while walking and running, but not dashing. The new Force skill Rod Technique PP Well Up skill is now going to allow you that natural PP recovery during charge techs as well as uncharged techs, meaning that natural PP recovery can occur at a much higher rate during battle. Now, why is it such a big game changer to have more natural PP recovery happening? It's because every normal attack is a DPS loss when compared to a casted technique. You usually use normal attacks when you need PP. If you can maintain PP regeneration requiring minimal normal attacks, you are casting more techniques. More techniques means more elemental down value being accrued on the enemy, which makes you a more impactful player on the fight since you are going to be creating elemental downs more frequently. So let's now direct our attention to some data that I have collected. So I will be using two different sets of Giant armors. The first one are level 40 Giants, but they have 0 fixes on them. So it is a 139 PP build, but has no Fixa Natura on it. The other set of Giants that I do have is that set that will finish at 140 PP and has 14.5% natural PP recovery due to Fixa Naturas. And I actually reset all of my skill trees, so I have 0 points into anything that could potentially affect natural PP recovery as well. So this is the de facto clean natural PP regeneration that you will see on any character with nothing on it compared to a character with Fixa Natura. In the no Fixa example, it took 27.25 seconds to regenerate their full bar of PP, and for the Fixa Natura build, it took 23.59 seconds to regenerate their entire bar. So we can now convert these into pp per second values. And so the no Fixa value is 5.064. And for the Fixa Natura build, it is 5.89 pp per second. So you are seeing an improvement on your photon power per second regeneration due to just that little bit of natural pp recovery. But there's an even easier way that you can calculate these. You can actually calculate this all by hand and get very similar numbers to me. So in the NGS verification data storage document, it has been verified that the natural pp recovery of every single character in the game is 5 photon power per second, which is very close to what I observed in my example here. And all natural pp recovery that you can get in your build is multiplicative, much like all the other systems in our games. So you can actually multiply for the Fixa Natura example, and you can multiply it by the 3 units that I have, which is 1.05, 1.05, and 1.045, which will make up that 14.5% natural pp recovery that I have. And that value will come out to a 5.76 pp per second value. So it's a little bit off, but not enough to be significant. So let's begin introducing more natural regeneration through the force skill tree to see how that modifies these observable numbers. And in this test, the no Fixa build regened all of its pp in 13.49 seconds, and the Fixa Natura build regened all of its pp in 12.04 seconds. We can then turn those into pp per second values, which would give you 10.3 pp per second for the no Fixa build and 11.627 pp per second for the Fixa Natura build. And once again, you can calculate all of these values without having to do any of these tests, and those numbers are very similar to the values that we are observing here. And this last example that I want to show is going to be using the 200% natural regeneration from the skill tree plus the 100% natural regeneration you can earn by doing a sidestep while equipped with the Evoleclipse weapon series. This isn't out yet, but it will be released with the Kvaris region, and we already know the stats on this weapon series from a previous post. So we can calculate just like we did the other ones, and you can get these two values here, which would be 20 pp per second for a no Fixa build, and for a Fixa Natura build with 14.5% recovery, you would have 23.042 pp per second. Now, you're not going to always be able to keep this skill active, but it's a 10-second cooldown, but it lasts for 20 seconds. So you actually have 10 seconds with this skill active to try and sidestep again and get this skill going again. So it may not be as hard as we think, and this may be more possible than we once thought. And I want to bring up a fun question for the video. Is it possible to have enough PP recovery to infinitely cast an uncharged technique? So that's what we're going to try to answer now using Foy, which is the cheapest photon power cost of any technique at 15. Chances are we're going to be using that quite a bit in the next region as well. The thing about uncharged techniques is that they all take the same time to cast them, regardless of what skill it is or what element it is. All techniques take 0.78 seconds to cast. So if we divide that 15 photon power required to use the skill by the time it takes to use that skill, we can get a value of 19.23 photon power per second required to cast that voice skill. And all of these other values that we've been calculating are in pp per second. So you can actually see right now, there are a couple numbers that actually exceed this value requirement. So in a vacuum, that would mean that as long as you can maintain those requirements, you would be able to infinitely cast that skill. So I know another real big question that a lot of people are going to ask is, where does that leave Fixa Performa? Fixa Performa is by far the best Fixa that we've had for units in the game since the beginning. Can Fixa Natura beat Fixa Performa? And if so, at what point can it beat Fixa Performa? So for this example, I'm going to be using 3 Fixa 3 Performa units, simply because Fixa Performa units will always be very expensive. So going for Fixa 4 or 5 is not going to be attainable for the typical player. Fixa 3s are probably going to be where you can stop if you go for Performa. So there is a bit of a difference between the Fixa level of the Naturas and Performas, but when you actually compare the value of what a Natura Fixa level 5 would go for and a Fixa Performa 3, they are going to be about similar. So this actually is a pretty fair comparison to make. So just like other multiplicative equations in our game, Performa also applies to that equation. It is a diminishing return equation since we are reducing the value of something. So you're not getting 9% PP reduction from these 3 units. You're actually getting 8.73 PP consumption reduction. And so if we factor that in on the 15 PP cost per FOI cast, we can distinguish that it will cost 13.69 PP per cast of FOI using these 3 Performa units. And once again, if we divide that by the time that it takes to cast any Uncharged technique skill, which is 0.78 seconds, it will cost 17.55 PP per second to be able to infinitely cast FOI using Performa units. And if we subtract this value from the 19.23 PP per second cost that FOI requires without any Performa units, there is a difference of 1.67 PP per second, and that is what the Fixa Performa units are affecting. That 8.73% PP consumption reduction is directly translating to 1.67 photon power per second recovery. So how does that stack up against Fixa Natura? So if we go back to a couple of our examples, I'm going to go back to our second example, which was only using the 200% natural regeneration from the skill tree. So if we were to use the no Fixa PP per second value and add that additional 1.67 PP per second that the Performa is attributing to, you will have a value of how much PP regen you are getting theoretically from using Performa units. That's going to give you 11.67 PP per second regeneration. And you can compare that to the 11.52 you get with Fixa Natura. It is very close. But there is one thing that we haven't talked about. We do know that this new force skill rod technique, PP well up skill, it's going to have a PP recovery penalty. We don't know how much that is, but some of these Natura numbers that you have been seeing haven't been affected by that reduction. So let's go through some hypothetical penalties that could occur so we can see what these numbers may more realistically reflect when the Kvaris patch goes live. And here are some of those values with percent recovery reductions. These numbers right here are only showcasing the PP per second values observed on the 200% natural PP recovery through the force skill tree. And you can tell that the build using Fixa Natura is being affected by these recovery reductions more significantly, since all of its PP recovery value comes from natural PP recovery. The reason why the Performa build is being affected less is because that 1.67 PP recovery observed through Performa is not affected by that natural recovery, so it always stays there. So there's less value being affected by that reduction. Let's do one final calculation, implementing the natural regeneration that you would observe if you had the Evoleclipse item potential active. And you'll see in these values that the Natura build actually has more PP recovery per second, since more of their values being affected because of that 100% additional natural recovery through the Evoleclipse item potential. You'll see that the Natura build actually outperforms the Performa build in every single example, regardless of that recovery reduction. It does get pretty close at 40%, but that is a significant recovery reduction if that is how much that they decide to reduce the natural recovery while using these uncharged skills. So is infinitely casting going to be possible? It could be if you're running Evoleclipse and you can continually keep that natural regeneration up from the item potential. Depending on how much natural PP recovery reduction that this skill has on it, it is very possible Does Natura become the best option for you as a Force main? I will have to say no. Performa is still always going to be king. And it's very simple. Performa requires nothing. It asks nothing additional of you. All it wants is for you to use skills and you receive benefits from it. That is an incredible value to have in a build, that you add it to your kit and you just get bonuses. The thing about Fixa Natura is that it requires some additional investment to get the most out of it. But what should be apparent here is that Fixa Natura is not a joke. You can go into Fixa Natura and you can be competitive. So this is something to look into when we get into Kvaris. You might be able to find an extremely killer deal on Fixa Natura, since not everybody is going to be informed about this change. If you can find a Fixa Natura unit for a third of the price and it's giving you almost 80 to 90% of the effectiveness that Performa does, why wouldn't you buy that? So these are things to keep in mind when we move into Kvaris, and especially when you're figuring out what your upcoming build is going to be. So that's that. I hope it was informative. I hope you learned something. I hope all you Force mains out there are extremely excited about your skill. And let me know in the comments below, how do you feel about this? And until next time, I'll see you all real soon.